Hey guys, welcome back to The Readers. I hope you are having an amazing day. Let's get right into the stories. The first one is an entitled People's Story. I'm a civil engineer in my early 30s, which means I'm basically obsessed with details, measurements, and making sure everything is exactly where it should be. It's probably what saved me in this whole mess. About 6 months ago, my great-uncle passed away and left me something pretty unusual in his will. Not a house or money, but a weird little half-acre piece of land with nothing on it except a beautiful in-ground swimming pool and a small cabana. When I first heard about this inheritance, I was confused. The property was literally in the middle of a fancy suburban neighborhood, completely surrounded by these massive houses. It didn't make any sense to me how this random plot of land could exist like that. But when I went to check it out and met with the estate lawyer, everything became clear. Turns out my great-uncle was quite the character. Back in the late 1990s, he owned a huge farm in what's now an expensive area. A developer approached him wanting to buy the whole thing to build a subdivision. My great-uncle agreed to sell most of it, but there was one condition that seemed crazy to everyone involved. He absolutely refused to give up the small section where he had built his favorite swimming pool back in the 1970s. The developer thought he was nuts but really wanted the land, so they worked out this weird deal. My great-uncle sold everything except for this one half-acre plot right in the middle. The developer had to build the entire neighborhood around it, creating this bizarre situation where my great-uncle had his own private island of property completely surrounded by what would become the subdivision. Being the thorough engineer that I am, I immediately ordered a new land survey and did a complete title search when I inherited the place. I wanted to make absolutely sure I understood exactly what I owned. The results were crystal clear. The property was 100% mine with its own separate parcel number, recorded deed, and everything. I knew every inch of those property lines better than the back of my hand. There was also a handwritten note from my great-uncle with the deed that really got to me. He wrote something like, "This was my escape from the world. Take care of it and never let anyone push you around about it." It made me realize this wasn't just about owning some random land. This was about protecting something my great-uncle really cared about. The pool itself was in decent shape, but needed some work. I spent several weekends that spring getting everything perfect. I had the water tested, serviced the pump system, cleaned all the tiles, and got the chemistry balanced just right. By July, the water was absolutely pristine and the whole area looked amazing. That's when I had my first encounter with the HOA president, and let me tell you, it was something else. It was one of those brutally hot Saturday afternoons in mid-July when the temperature hit about 95 degrees. I had been working in my regular job all week and was really looking forward to finally using the pool. I grabbed a cold drink, put on my swim trunks, and spent about an hour just floating around on a pool float, completely relaxed and enjoying the silence. Then I heard the sound of a golf cart approaching. I figured it was probably just someone from the neighborhood who was curious about the pool, since I'm sure people wondered who owned it, but when I looked up, I could tell this wasn't going to be a friendly visit. This woman, who looked to be in her late 50s, was climbing out of a golf cart with HOA written on the side. She was wearing an official-looking polo shirt that said something about being the neighborhood president, and she had this expression on her face like she had just caught someone committing a serious crime. She marched right up to the edge of the pool with her hands on her hips, scowling down at me. Without any kind of greeting, she announced that the pool was only for residents of the neighborhood and their registered guests, and that I needed to leave immediately. She introduced herself as the HOA president and made it very clear that she considered me to be trespassing. I stayed calm and paddled my float a little closer to where she was standing. I told her I thought there might be some kind of misunderstanding here. This response seemed to make her even angrier. She pulled out this laminated copy of what looked like HOA rules and started reading from it about community facilities and unauthorized use. She threatened to call the police if I didn't get out right away. I couldn't help but be a little amused by the whole situation. I asked her if those rules happened to include a map showing exactly which properties were covered by the HOA. I explained that I was pretty familiar with property surveys and had a feeling this particular piece of land wasn't going to be on her map. She just laughed at me like I was being ridiculous. She pointed out that the pool was obviously in the middle of their neighborhood, so of course it belonged to the HOA. She seemed to think the very idea that it could be private property was completely absurd. At this point, she was getting really worked up about her authority being questioned. She dramatically pulled out her phone and announced that she was calling 911 to have me arrested for trespassing. She made the call right there in front of me, speaking loud enough that I could hear every word. She told the dispatcher that there was a hostile person who had broken into their community pool and was refusing to leave their private property. While we waited for the police to arrive, she started trying to intimidate me. She took pictures of me with her phone, saying they were for the police report and that I was going to end up with a criminal record. She kept talking about how they were going to press full charges and make sure I learned my lesson about trespassing. I have to admit, I was finding the whole thing pretty entertaining. I got out of the pool, dried off, and just sat in one of the lounge chairs sipping my drink while she continued her rant. I even checked the time on my watch a couple of times like I was bored, which seemed to make her even more furious. When the two police officers showed up about 15 minutes later, they looked like they were responding to a pretty routine call. The HOA president immediately rushed over to them, playing up the victim angle. She told them I was trespassing in their pool and absolutely had to be arrested. She was gesturing wildly and talking about how I had been hostile and refused to cooperate. One of the officers walked over to me and politely asked if I could step away from the pool area. I told him that I would be happy to cooperate, but that I thought I could clear up the whole situation pretty easily. I explained that I wasn't actually trespassing because this was my property. I walked over to the cabana where I had left my bag and pulled out a professional folder that I always kept there with all my important documents. I handed the officer a certified copy of my property deed, an official survey map that clearly showed my parcel as completely separate from the surrounding HOA property, and my driver's license to confirm my identity. I explained the situation as clearly as I could. I told them that according to the official county records, this specific lot had its own parcel number and was privately owned by me. The HOA had been developed on all the surrounding land, but they had no legal authority over this particular piece of property because it had been specifically excluded from the original sale. The officers spent a few minutes examining all the paperwork. They looked at the survey map, then looked around at the property boundaries, then looked back at the HOA president. Finally, one of them turned to her and explained that according to the official documents, this was indeed private property, and there was no trespassing happening. The HOA president completely lost it at this point. She started yelling that the documents had to be fake and that I must have forged them somehow. She demanded that the officers arrest me anyway and seemed to think they were just being tricked by some kind of elaborate scam. The second officer was clearly getting annoyed with her behavior. He told her pretty sternly that filing a false police report was a serious offense, and that this was obviously a civil matter. He explained that if the HOA wanted to dispute the property lines, they would need to take it to court, but that the police couldn't remove someone from their own property. Both officers apologized to me for the disturbance and left. The HOA president was left standing there looking absolutely furious and humiliated. She got back in her golf cart and drove off without saying another word. But I could tell from her expression that this wasn't going to be the end of it. Sure enough, about a week later, I received a threatening letter from the HOA lawyer. They were claiming all kinds of things, including something called adverse possession, because apparently some residents had used the pool in the past before I took ownership of the property. They demanded that I stop using their pool and threatened legal action if I didn't cooperate. This is where my engineering background and knowledge of property law really came in handy. I knew exactly how to handle this situation, and I decided it was time to teach them a lesson about what happens when you try to bully someone who actually knows their rights. I hired my own lawyer and had him draft a response that not only completely refuted all their bogus claims, but also included a formal no trespassing order specifically naming the HOA president and all the board members. The letter made it very clear that if any of them set foot on my property again, I would immediately file for a restraining order and press criminal charges. But I wasn't done yet. I wanted to make sure that everyone in the neighborhood understood exactly what had happened and who was really at fault here. I had a large professional sign made that I put up right at the edge of my property line where it would be clearly visible from the main path through the neighborhood. It said private property and included my lot number, and it mentioned that the pool was now a private club with membership by invitation only. I also added that trespassers would be prosecuted to the full extent of the law. Then I came up with what I thought was a pretty brilliant solution to the whole mess. I realized that the HOA residents had probably been looking forward to using what they thought was their community pool all summer, and now they were stuck without any swimming facilities because of their president's incompetence. I got a list of all the homeowners in the neighborhood from the county records and sent each of them a polite, professional letter explaining the entire situation. I laid out all the facts clearly and calmly, including how the property had been legally separated from the original farm sale, how I had inherited it legitimately, and how the HOA board had acted inappropriately by calling the police and sending threatening legal letters. But here's the part that I'm most proud of. Instead of just telling them they couldn't use the pool anymore, I offered them a solution. I explained that I was starting something called a private pool club for the summer season. I would sell a limited number of family memberships for a reasonable fee of about $250 for the entire season. The money would be used for maintenance, liability insurance, and improvements to the facility. I attached a simple set of rules that were way more relaxed than anything the HOA would have come up with, along with an application form. I made it clear that this was a privilege, not a right. and that members would need to follow basic common sense guidelines about respecting the property and other users. The response was absolutely overwhelming. Within just a few days, I had received checks and applications from dozens of families. It turned out that most of the residents were actually pretty reasonable people who had been frustrated with the HOA president's power-tripping behavior for a while. They were thrilled to have access to a pool again, especially one that was run by someone who actually treated them like adults. The real satisfaction came at the next HOA meeting, which I didn't attend, but heard about from several of my new pool club members. Apparently, the residents were absolutely furious with the board for their handling of the whole situation. They had wasted HOA money on lawyers, embarrassed the entire neighborhood with their incompetence, and nearly cost everyone access to the pool permanently. The HOA president tried to defend her actions by claiming she was just protecting community property, but when residents found out that she had never even bothered to check the actual property records before calling the police, they were outraged. She was voted out of her position that very night and replaced with someone who actually understood the importance of getting facts straight before taking action. Meanwhile, I was having the time of my life running my little pool club. The members were all great people who really appreciated having a clean, well-maintained facility with reasonable rules. I became known as the cool pool manager who actually listened to suggestions and treated everyone fairly. The whole experience ended up being incredibly profitable too. The membership fees not only covered all the pool maintenance, utilities, and insurance costs, but they also paid my property taxes for several years in advance and left me with a nice profit on top of that. I was able to make some upgrades to the facility, including better poolside furniture and improved lighting for evening swimming. A few months later, I was sitting in one of the lounge chairs by the pool on a beautiful evening, watching families enjoy the water and listening to the happy sounds of kids playing. I had my tablet with me and was looking at my bank statements, seeing how well the pool club was doing financially. The whole thing had turned into this amazing little business that basically ran itself. I thought about my great-uncle's note and realized that I had done exactly what he had asked me to do. I had protected his little oasis and made sure that nobody was able to push me around about it. But more than that, I had turned it into something that was bringing joy to dozens of families while also teaching some important lessons about the dangers of assuming you have authority that you don't actually possess. The former HOA president had learned the hard way that you can't just bully people into giving up their property rights, especially when you don't bother to check the basic facts first. The neighborhood had learned that sometimes the people in charge don't actually know what they're talking about, and I had learned that standing up for yourself can sometimes lead to opportunities you never expected. Looking back on the whole situation, I think the best part was how it all worked out for everyone involved except for the person who created the problem in the first place. The residents got access to a pool that was better managed than it ever would have been under HOA control. I got a profitable little business that paid for itself and then some. And my great-uncle's pool became exactly what he had always intended it to be, a peaceful escape from the world where people could relax and enjoy themselves. The only person who didn't benefit was the former HOA president, who had to deal with the consequences of her own arrogance and incompetence. But honestly, I think that's exactly how these situations should work out. When someone tries to abuse their authority and bully people who haven't done anything wrong, they should be the ones who end up suffering the consequences. I still run the pool club every summer, and it's grown into something really special. The members have become like an extended family, and we have regular events like barbecues and movie nights by the pool. The whole thing has become so much more than just a place to swim. It's become a real community center that brings people together. And every time I see that private property sign at the edge of my land, I can't help but smile thinking about how a simple misunderstanding about property ownership turned into one of the best things that ever happened to me. Sometimes standing up for your rights doesn't just protect what you have. It can also open doors to opportunities you never saw coming. The best part is knowing that my great-uncle would be proud of how everything turned out. He wanted me to protect his oasis and never let anyone push me around about it, and I think I've done exactly that. But I've also managed to share it with people who really appreciate it, which I think he would have loved too. So that's my story about how an HOA president's power trip backfired spectacularly and ended up making me a nice profit while bringing a community together. Sometimes the best revenge really is just living well and proving that bullies don't always win. Update: 2 years later. I can't believe it's been 2 years since I first posted this story, but so many people have been asking for updates that I figured I should share what's happened since then. Spoiler alert, things got even better, and karma continued to work its magic on the former HOA president. First, let me talk about how the pool club has evolved. What started as a simple summer membership program has turned into something way beyond what I ever imagined. We now have over 80 member families, which is actually at capacity for the size of the facility. I've had to create a waiting list because demand is so high. The financial success has been incredible. Between membership fees, private party rentals, and some additional services I've added, the pool operation now generates enough income to not only cover all expenses, but also to fund major improvements every year. I've added a hot tub, upgraded all the poolside furniture, installed better lighting for evening events, and even put in a small snack bar area with a refrigerator and microwave. But the best part has been watching the community that's formed around the pool. We now have regular events throughout the summer. Barbecue nights, movie screenings projected onto a large screen I set up, kids' swimming lessons, and even adult water aerobics classes. Some of the members have become genuinely close friends, and there have been several marriages between people who met at pool events. The pool club has become so popular that I've actually had inquiries from people in other neighborhoods asking if I could help them set up similar arrangements. Apparently word has spread about how well this whole thing worked out, and other communities are dealing with their own HOA drama around recreational facilities. Now for the really satisfying part, what happened to the former HOA president? Remember how she got voted out that first year? Well, her problems were just getting started. It turns out that her aggressive approach to HOA management had created a lot more issues than just the pool situation. After she was removed from office, the new board decided to do a complete audit of the HOA finances and operations during her tenure. What they found was pretty shocking. She had been using HOA funds for all kinds of inappropriate expenses, expensive meals that she claimed were board meetings, lawn care for her own property that she charged to community beautification, and even a new golf cart that she said was necessary for neighborhood patrols, but which she used primarily for personal errands. The total amount of misappropriated funds was over $15,000. The new board filed a lawsuit against her for embezzlement and breach of fiduciary duty. She ended up having to pay back all the money plus legal fees and interest. From what I heard through the neighborhood grapevine, this financial hit combined with the legal costs pretty much wiped out her savings. But wait, it gets better. The stress of the legal situation and the social embarrassment in the neighborhood apparently caused major problems in her marriage. Her husband, who had always been pretty reasonable when I occasionally ran into him, filed for divorce about 6 months after the lawsuit was settled. According to the Gossip Network, which is pretty reliable in a neighborhood like this, he cited her pattern of aggressive and dishonest behavior as one of the reasons. She ended up having to sell her house to pay for the divorce settlement and legal fees. The really ironic part is that the people who bought her house immediately applied for pool club membership and are now some of our most active members. They host pool parties regularly and their kids practically live in the water all summer. The former president moved to a small apartment across town and apparently tried to get involved in that HOA as well, but word of her previous issues had spread through local property management networks. They basically told her thanks but no thanks when she volunteered for board positions. Meanwhile, the new leadership in my neighborhood HOA has been fantastic. The current president actually came to me personally to apologize for the previous administration's behavior and to thank me for handling the situation so professionally. They've been nothing but supportive of the pool club and have even helped promote our community events. One of the coolest developments has been the relationship between the pool club and the broader neighborhood. Even residents who aren't members appreciate having the facility there because it's increased property values for everyone. Several real estate agents have told me that houses in the neighborhood are selling faster and for higher prices specifically because buyers love the idea of having access to a well-managed private pool club. I've also had some interesting conversations with property lawyers and civil engineers who have heard about the situation. Apparently what happened with my great-uncle's property and the subsequent HOA conflict has become something of a case study in property law classes. A few law students have even contacted me to interview me about the experience for their research projects. The pool itself continues to be my pride and joy. I've become something of an expert in pool maintenance and water chemistry, which I never expected. There's something really satisfying about maintaining a facility that brings so much happiness to so many people. On busy weekend afternoons when the pool is full of families having fun, I often think about my great uncle and how pleased he would be to see his little oasis being enjoyed by so many people. I've also made some great connections through the pool club that have helped my engineering career. Several of the members work in construction and development, and I've gotten some consulting opportunities through those relationships. It's amazing how a completely unrelated situation can end up opening professional doors you never expected. Looking ahead, I'm considering some additional improvements for next season. A few members have suggested adding a small pavilion area for shade during events, and I'm looking into the possibility of extending the season with some kind of heating system for the spring and fall months. The legal precedent for my case has also had some broader impacts. The county has updated their property record system to make it easier for people to verify ownership and boundaries, partly in response to situations like mine where HOA were making claims about properties they didn't actually control. One thing that's been really gratifying is hearing from other people who have used my experience as inspiration for standing up to their own HOA problems. I've gotten messages from folks across the country who have faced similar situations with overreaching community associations. Some have successfully challenged inappropriate fines or restrictions by following the example of thorough documentation and professional legal responses that worked in my case. The most satisfying update of all is probably just how normal and peaceful everything has become. The pool club runs smoothly, the neighborhood relationships are great, and I get to spend my summers managing a facility that brings joy to dozens of families. What started as a stressful confrontation with an entitled HOA president turned into one of the best things that ever happened to me. I still have that professional sign at the edge of my property, but now it's more of a historical marker than a warning. New residents sometimes ask about it, and it's always fun to tell them the story of how their neighborhood pool club came to exist. My great-uncle's note about protecting his oasis and never letting anyone push me around has taken on even more meaning over the past couple of years. Not only did I protect what he left me, but I turned it into something that's enriched the lives of hundreds of people. I think that's the best possible way to honor his memory and his gift. So that's my update. The pool club is thriving. The former HOA president learned some expensive lessons about the consequences of abusing authority, and I'm living proof that sometimes standing up for your rights can lead to opportunities you never imagined. Thanks to everyone who has followed this story and shared their own experiences. It's been amazing to hear how many people have dealt with similar situations and found ways to come out on top. The next one is a pro-revenge story. My landlord was a terrible human being. Honestly, calling him a human is even pushing it. Just a few things he has done to me over the past 3 years. Stole my dryer and other household products that are in a common area. Made me pay for a plumbing repair which was deemed normal wear and tear. Tried breaking into my house. Retaliated against me because I went to my lawyer after he sent me a letter about a parking spot. He tried charging me an extra $150/month. Mind you, I was never late for rent in 3 years, except for when he made me pay for the plumbing repair. So the next month I was a couple days late. The list goes on. Now this apartment was nowhere near nice. I found out the plumbing was illegal. He left me with a porch for years that has severe safety issues. The ceiling paint was always falling down. Gas heater was not up to code, and so on. I finally got my chance to leave after he wanted to raise my rent $500/month. He will do anything and everything to get more money out of his tenants. So I called the building inspector 4 days before I left. I told him everything. The porch, when he finally replaced it, didn't have a permit and was definitely not up to code. I told him about the plumbing and the heater. I went on and on. The inspector came over the very next day. I saw him taking measurements. Each violation is a $500/day fine until fixed. I honestly don't know what happened, but my God, did it feel good to finally get him back. He's at the very least on the town's radar. A week before I moved out, he tried telling me I needed to be out at a specific time. I never responded, and where I lived, that's not how it works. He tried to threaten me with the police if I wasn't gone. Well, I went to the police myself that morning to warn them. The landlord did come by, threaten me, and harass me. I called the police. They informed him I was in the right. Long story short, he had broken into my apartment. I had left to go to storage while I was gone. He nailed my door shut. I told the police to get the supervisor because I was over being harassed by this guy. Go figure he left before the supervisor could get there. I'm positive he knew he'd be arrested on site. Got the police report. They're charging him with a felony for breaking and entering. Fines plus a charge. Don't be a jerk to good people. The next one is a malicious compliance story. With all these karma bots posting the same damn stories, I've decided that you need another one of mine. After my latest MC in an IT department, I decided that I no longer wanted to work in IT. Instead, I got a job working with institutionalized young people, an open institution, so not the truly broken kids, because surely people who worked with messed up kids would be better listeners. After about a month there, I was absolutely certain that one of the kids had a wrong diagnosis and the medication he was on was making everything worse for him. I brought this up at a meeting and was instantly shot down because I had no formal relevant education, my position was as assistant, and never mind the fact that I have the actual diagnosis this kid was supposed to have, and they knew that. I got shut down hard, and the only other decent person there explained it to me later as the same internal politics and power plays as everywhere else. Well, Duck, 2 weeks later, we had mandatory external oversight come by. This required us to go through all the kids, updates, treatment plans, etc., and when this kid came up, it was crickets all around. Boss man pulls up his file, and behold, there's no mention of my remarks from the meeting. Boss man words a request for more information poorly, which I can't directly translate from Danish, but it's more or less if there's anything relevant that she should know, and I think the file being incomplete is relevant, so I tell him that. Death stares all around. External oversight lady asks, so I tell her. It happens to be her area of expertise. She orders the kid taken of his meds, and a week later he's much better, still a messed up kid, but at least not drugged up to his eyeballs. I get fired for not being loyal. Since I was still in the trial period, no reason was needed, but that's my guess. But as I'm packing up my crap, the kid comes running and hugs me. I don't know what ended up happening to him, but a few years later, I found out the company running that place went bankrupt. Guess who didn't get a lot of kids assigned to them after missing the most obvious of ducking issues? The next one is an entitled people story. I, 47F, have an older sibling, a sister, 53. Let's call her Karen. In the last 10 years or so, Karen has become bitter and entitled. Karen portrays herself to be a lawyer on social media. She is not one. But the innuendos are insane. Karen has a husband. Let's call him Todd. Karen and Todd has always been envious of me and jealous because of the things I've been able to do and have. I went to college 2 degrees, paid with loans, grants, work-study, jobs. Karen went to college for 2 years associates. Karen was encouraged to go on and finish schooling to actually become a lawyer, but declined because she didn't want to continue at school at that time and wanted to make money at the job she was working at. Our parents offered to pay for the schooling, and it was still a no-go. I had a nice wedding. Karen had a nice wedding. Karen had babies. I had babies. Karen and Todd have had to always work to keep the house she wanted and things they wanted once they had kids. I was fortunate enough with budgeting and sacrifices to stay home with my 3 kids for periods of time. I think the more time Karen spent with Todd, the envy grew and she started to feel entitled. Karen became envious when my husband and I built a new home. Karen showed up late to many holidays we hosted, always us hosting, so that she could feel like she was controlling when we ate. Or else she slept or had her face buried in social media on her phone. Karen found humor in being mean and cruel. I stopped having family gatherings as they became stressful in 2022. For years, Karen has been making plans of how she will live on in the properties our parents own. Our parents are still alive. She has kept score of what she believes are the costs that our parents have spent on ME, college, high school trips, weddings, babies, and has come up with the idea that she deserves the Rocky Mountain cabin home to live in during the summer and the Southwestern home to live in the winter to make up for what she thinks I was given. Let's mention that she had 6 years more with our parents before I even came along. Our parents helped Karen and Todd along the way as well, like giving up their initial retirement for a few years to help with their children so they did not lose their jobs while my niece was undergoing treatment for a rare metabolic disease. Karen and Todd were given money to help with mortgage and groceries, and several years of daycare costs were spared when Mom and Dad got their kids up and out every day and kept niece home. Our parents are livid that this is going on because they are still alive. As time has gone on, Karen has become more delusional, and in believing her own thoughts, has become more hateful towards my parents and I. Karen believes she heard my parents say that the everything was going to be hers someday. They meant everything / what's left will be both of ours and our families. Karen is livid that she has to split my parents' estate 50-50ths. According to Karen, her life has never been 50-50ths. I am stealing her inheritance. Todd and Karen are playing victim to whomever will listen. They have been telling their children, whom I used to be close with, untruthful things, so they don't want anything to do with me. Our parents have not changed their will. Karen is now telling everybody that she has been cut out from the will and that she and her family will get nothing from our parents. She is building up delusions of untruths that are making her more and more hateful. Karen has not seen or made an effort to speak to our parents in approximately 3 years. When she realized she could not confuse and bully our parents into signing things over to her, there was a big blow-up and she had a tantrum storming out. Mom and Pop have aged significantly and had several medical issues requiring needed help. I help them when they are back in our home state and help them as much as I can when they are in their southwestern home. All of this while I am dealing with cancer, injuries sustained in a car accident, and while undergoing 7 surgeries in 1 year. The more time I spend to help our parents, the more the delusion grows in Karen that we are plotting against her. We have tried to get Karen and her family, 4 adult kids, to all come and talk with our parents and my family so everyone gets the truth. Karen lashed out when her adult children were contacted by our mother. One ran home to tell Mom and Dad instead of making up his own mind at age 26. The family is divided now, and Karen is telling everyone who will listen that she was disowned. all because she was told that the estate is to be divided 50/50ths. Her retirement plans that she made in her head have been squashed. There are more Karen stories to share at another time. Anyway, thank you for watching.